Hello, Garland Nixon here, and let's talk about this whole woke phenomenon from the perspective of geopolitics. Let's talk. Hello there, Garland here, and today and by we I mean me, we're going to talk about this whole woke phenomenon. It sounds like should be a movie, doesn't it? Or a song, the woke phenomenon. But we're going to talk about this woke phenomenon, what it is, what it means. I think a lot of it is. Uh, I hate to use the word psychological operation, but I'd prefer the words manipulation of propaganda, manipulation of cultural issues. So let's talk about this woke thing. Let's get a kind of a foundation for what I'm talking about, because as I always say, woke is just a sound. It is a sound. It's nothing more. It is a symbol that refers to something. So when I say woke, what do I mean? Because, and it's important when we talk about these things, right? Three different people could use the term woke, and three different people could mean totally different things. If you write a law, not laws, but I've been involved in writing regulations. And at the beginning of that regulation, what do you need? You need definitions. You need a glossary of terms so that when someone goes through that law or rule or regulation, in this instance that I was involved in writing, it was in the state of Maryland, it was regulations. You got to be definitive. When I say this is what I mean. So you can't charge somebody with a crime if you weren't very clear about what it is. And that always comes back to words or phrases. What do we mean? What do I mean when I say woke? Well, that's difficult because we know what it is, but it's hard to put it into words. So initially, the woke thing, of course, the obvious, practical expression of the word is awake. You are not. It's a kind of a slang term for being awake. Okay. And now initially it was meant to mean something like people mean when they say red pilled, awake, aware. I would put it like this. Initially it was meant looking at cultural issues through ways that weren't A, mainstream narrative, or B, clouded by false judgments. So it was aware of reality. One of the things that when you talk about Eastern philosophy, Hindu, Buddhism, etc., right? It is reaching enlightenment. It is becoming awake. It is waking up from this dream. It's unlearning things that we already know, right? That kind of stuff, right? Unlearning all of these things that we've been taught. So woke initially simply was you're awake and you're aware of what's going on around you outside of the traditional narratives that you've been given, that whatever the case, you're a bad guy or you're a good guy, or this determines what's a bad guy or a good guy. So initially it was fairly benign in that it wasn't a weapon. It was a description of a state of mind. In fact, one could argue that it had a positive connotation to it, in that it was kind of a description of a person who is becoming at least politically and culturally enlightened. So that was the original, and not that's what it was or wasn't. That was the initial concept of being awake or wokeness or aware of what's going on, not having just a superficial understanding of cultural issues, of political issues, but having an in-depth understanding to the point where you've done research and you are past the tradition. Everybody else thinks it's a certain way, but the kind of like the truth kind of thing. That's what it was originally supposed to be. Now, the question between what it was supposed to be and what it is now, it's like, I put it like this. It's like people talk about political parties from the 1860s and pretend like that applies today. Well, the Democrats in 1863 were the party of this. Well, the Republicans in 1911 were the party of this. Well, the Whigs and the party back in the 1625. People always got to go 100 years back to prove a point. It's usually some sort of motivated reasoning, and it's usually my group is better than your group, and I'll go back to 1867 or 1667 or whenever I need to prove that my group is better than your group, not realizing what you're really doing is you're taking it to the perspective of absurdity. Nobody in your group was alive in 1625. Not them, not their grandfathers or grandfathers and grandfathers before them. The only thing they have in common is the name. Okay, that's it. That's what they got in common with the group from the 1860s, the name. Nothing more, nothing less. They've gone through all kinds of transitions. The woke person was the person that understood all of those things. The red-pilled person, however you want to put it, that was traditional woke, but it has changed. Now let's talk about woke now from Garland Nixon's perspective. I'll give you my basics of it, and I've said it before. There's probably people listening that have heard this before, but spare, those who have heard it before, spare with me, bear with me. It's only going to take about a minute to a minute and a half out of your time for me to explain what I'm getting at. Right? Here's the way I see woke. In this neoliberal, and see, so here's what I'm saying. Woke during the time of neoliberalism, woke in the context that we have now, which is that words and phrases have been manipulated, commandeered and manipulated by neoliberal forces, by neoliberal, neoconservative, whatever you call them, forces, right? In this day and time, what does woke mean? So the woke now is more of a kind of would be considered a psychological operation, a way to convince people to support things that they wouldn't normally support. Let me give you an example. If you go to the woke people and with great contradiction, support things they would normally support with great contradiction, right? It is this: the neoliberal ideology, we'll call it, right? Whatever this ideology is, religion, whatever you want to call it, right? It manifests itself, it expresses itself in three ways, in my opinion, right? Foreign policy, we call that neoconservatism. It's an assertive, aggressive, militaristic, colonialist, neocolonialist foreign policy, right? I have a right. My country's the U.S. empire, and we got a right to rule the world. And our vassals have a right to be junior vassals and rule the world at our, as we do what we tell them to do. And if there is some benefit from ruling the world, then they get a smidgen of it. So this particular ideology expresses itself when it comes to foreign policy as an aggressive, assertive neoconservatism. I like to call it good old-fashioned fascism, militarism, right? That's one way. Economically, it expresses itself, which is aligned with the neoconservatism, because as Thomas Friedman says, in order to have McDonald's, you got to have McDonnell Douglas, right? You utilize military assertiveness to the benefit of your corporations. So neoliberalism is the economic expression of this thing. The economic expression is neoliberalism. The militaristic foreign policy expression of this ideology is neoconservatism. See where I'm going? Now, anytime you talk politics, anytime you talk about geopolitics and international relations, you don't really understand politics if you don't bring the issue of culture into that conversation. The cultural expression of neoconservatism / neoliberalism may be even more so neoconservatism, because it's extremely authoritarian. The cultural expression of this ideology is wokeism. Right? So neoliberalism, if you understand what that is, basically allowing corporations to do whatever they want, however they want it. Corporations and governments become aligned and have an incestuous relationship, shall we say. Neoconservatism, which is an assertive, this is the rules-based order, the US-led international order. It's an assertion that says the 4% of the people in the United States have a right to dominate militarily, economically, the other 96% of the people in the world. That's neoconservatism. It's an assertive, fascist, militaristic ideology, right? So you got neoliberalism, neoconservatism. Neoliberalism would take too long, but it is basically, in a nutshell, it is extracting money from the rich, giving them to the poor. I mean, from the poor, giving it to the rich. That's the way it was, and completely releasing the powerful people, the oligarch class, to do anything they want, any way they want, and completely mixing them in with the government. Whereas neoconservatism is the military version of that. Now, well, let's get to wokeness. Let's get to the comment here. Wokeness now is a ideology, an expression of that neoliberal, neoconservative, invisible monster that allows the people in charge to maintain a grip on the narrative that they choose, to shame those who push back against the narrative, and to always it allows them to come up with dynamic excuses for military interventionalism and militarism and economic sanctions and economic interventionalism. It's a ready-made excuse for the domination of others around the world to take their stuff. And you use it on, remember, on your own people. Yeah, you use it. You don't say, hey, we need to remember this. We need to stay in Afghanistan. Why? Because the Taliban is mistreating the women in Afghanistan. They didn't say that for the women in Afghanistan to believe that, because they knew the women in Afghanistan knew better. They were running for their lives from drones. They said that to pacify the people in the United States, so they can justify their militarism by convincing people that they're doing it for a good reason. That's a big part of the geopolitics of wokeness. And that is, remember, there's a group of people that we have to stand up for. There's people that can't stand up for themselves, so therefore we have to stand up for themselves, for them. That justifies them. Then you simply come up with whatever you want to do. We want to sanction country X, right? Then you get a ready-made excuse that has some element of wokeness. Well, they're not acting right for the minorities, the LGBTQ group, whatever group, the women, you name it, right? And this gives you the moral high ground all the time. Well, we're not doing it for money. Are you kidding me? We're not doing it because we want war. We hate war, don't like money, not interested in that. However, this marginalized group X, we're just standing up for them, man. We're just standing up for them, those people. It'll shift sometime to a more general, assertion. It'll be the people of Syria. We're standing up for them because they're being mistreated by their bosses, and that's the general, by their rulers, and that's a general one. But oftentimes it'll focus more on the LGBTQ people, the minorities of some type, if we can find one. If not, we'll have to create one, make one up. Or of course the Muslims in instance of China. And it doesn't have to have any foundation in reality. It doesn't matter. I always say this: if somebody's not saying anything because it's real, it doesn't matter if you prove that it's false. They didn't say it because it was true in the first place, so it doesn't matter if you prove it false. It's just they're throwing dust in your eyes. They're throwing salt in your eyes, to coin a turn of a phrase that's often used in championship wrestling, right? We're going to throw some salt in your eyes, some dust or dirt, sand, whatever you want to call it, by pretending that this country has, fill in the blank, lithium, and we want the lithium. We have to stand up for, and remember, it's always going to be good, democracy. We're looking out for the people. Democracy implies, because to be quite frank, I would argue that this so-called war around the world, this crusade for democracy, that is supposedly in opposition to authoritarianism, is a branch of wokeism. Because remember, the whole wokeism thing is, I'm standing up for the little guy. And the interesting thing about wokeism is, standing up for the little guy always involves punishing someone, and the little guy never gets anything out of it. You see, if there is some genuine, here's the issue. If there is some genuine concern for a group, right, the little guy, and I'm going to quote, stand up for this little guy, then shouldn't I ask the little guy what he wants? Shouldn't I ask the little guy how he wants to deal with it? I remember seeing this thing where this family, somebody got murdered and the guy was going to get the chair, and the family was saying, we don't believe in the death penalty, we'd rather see him just go ahead and give him life in prison, but since we as a principle don't believe in the death penalty, we don't want the death penalty, we just want him to spend his life in prison. And I would argue, if I'm the judge, I take that into account. I mean, I'm a person against the death penalty anyway for a number of reasons, but if I'm the judge, I do think that should be taken into account. They're the ones who lost a family member, and so you have to take some concern into what they want, right? I would think if you're trying to get justice here, one of the things is the victims. What do they want? Okay, how about this? If you're going to help the black people are being treated wrong because somebody said something on the air that they shouldn't have said, or cracked a joke that they wouldn't crack. Shouldn't you ask black folks what they want? See, it's always a proxy war with that. It's always, I'm standing up for black folks, but I didn't ask black folks what they want. And I can't explain how my actions are going to help black folks. I'm standing up for the LGBTQ. I'm standing up for the women and it's always persecuting someone else. Well, somebody made a tweet on Twitter and I'm standing up for the trans people. Why? We got to punish him. He must be thrown off Twitter. Did the trans people all come to you and say, we want this guy thrown off Twitter? Number one. And number two, how's it going to help the trans people if we throw them off Twitter? What do they get out of it? They get nothing out of it. See, that's one of the things that you'll notice about this whole woke thing, and that is that the pushers of wokeness, right, when they constantly, there's this constant need for punishment, right? We got to punish Garland because he tweeted the wrong thing about the wrong community, right? But when you look at those, what they want, what they're asking for, and say, how does it help that community? See, if I believe, let's say a community has poverty and I feel they've got poverty because they've been mistreated in some kind of apartheid system, right? So they're a poor community, and I say those poor have been mistreated. Or let's say it's a Muslim minority in a Hindu country, and I feel like, hey, they've been mistreated because they're Muslim in a Hindu country, whatever the case may be, right? And somebody does something. If I take action, the question has to be, other than punishing, other than just making myself feel good or making myself look like a champion, here's a question: how does it help that group? How does it help that Muslim majority if I say Garland tweeted something, a minority, Garland tweeted something about the Muslims, so therefore he must be punished, he must be thrown off of all kinds of things, he must be deplatformed, all of the above, he must never be allowed to work again, he must starve and be left in the jungle to be eaten by the wild animals. How does that help the group that was allegedly insulted? More times than not, it's a twist of something that turned it into an insult. And let me add this. You will find this factor. The people who go after the so-called woke, whatever you want to call them, wokester authorities, the woke police, who go around going after people for woke violations, generally, more often than not, they're not even members of the community that they're supposed to be defending. But the other thing is this: they can never tell you how that helps the community, how it benefits the community. Throwing some guy off of Twitter, how's that help the minority? It doesn't really. What would help a minority group, right? Somebody does or something, having a conversation about it. And the question is this, and this is important: how far should we go in monitoring speech, particularly when what happens with look, if somebody just stands on a corner and screams out the N-word over and over and over again, you may not like it, but there are people who would argue that that's the equivalent of yelling fire in a crowded theater. So if something did, bottom line is this: if something did happen, there was a fight, there was a violence, there was some kind of a disturbance, that person could be held accountable. That person could be liable for legal action if they, created some kind of a fight, right? But what we're not, what so there's a discussion. The Supreme Court actually has discussed some of the words that are considered fighting words, right? Some things that you can say to people that you shouldn't be able to get away with because they're actually considered by the Supreme Court have said they're considered fighting words. But woke, you ever notice the woke police never ever have that? It's never, hey, the things that are considered fighting words. It's generally an interpretation of something they said. It's some kind of an interpretation that they said something, just mentioned trans people or something, or they said something like, well, I think a woman is only born as if she's born as a female, that's the only thing that's a woman. Something fairly benign like that. I'll put it like this: something that it don't matter whether somebody agrees with it or don't agree with it. The person has a right to their opinion, and they can make an argument supporting their opinion. So just because somebody says that doesn't imply malice. It doesn't imply that they have a negative. The only thing it implies is that they have that perspective. And here's the issue. Someone says, well, I think a woman only means, I don't agree that a trans person is a woman. Somebody says, or I don't agree that you can change and declare yourself a woman and become a woman. Okay, let's say you're a person who agrees. So what? How does it benefit anyone to go punish this person? If you go after this person and try to destroy them and all that, how does one trans person or non-trans person or anybody else benefit? The only thing you get to do is go out and attack your enemies. And here's what I will notice. Here's what I have noticed about the woke stuff. It is not equal justice under the law. It is not equally applied. As an example, all of these people screaming, Trump, Trump, Trump's a rapist, Trump's this, Trump's that, right? But when Tara Reade made a complaint about Joe Biden, the same organizations that have been pushing the Me Too movement, right? Some of the same, one of these organizations, I forgot the name of it, she approached them and said, look, I got a Me Too complaint against Biden, and I'd like you, talk to you people, and I'd like you to take it and run with it. And they said, no, we ain't doing it. She was like, well, wait a minute. Haven't you guys been taking claims and complaints against, and I'm paraphrasing, of course, it's not the exact words, against various, iterations of Me Too claims? And can't you take my bottom line is not happening. They wouldn't do it. Why? Because Biden was their guy. So they were willing to take any Me Too claim against a Trump or whoever they didn't like. Anybody, Bernie, they'd been happy to get one against Bernie. They didn't like him. Anybody they didn't like, they'd be happy to get a Me Too complaint about. But Joe Biden's Me Too complaint had to be ignored. So what does that show? It's not equal protection under the law. It's not a rule of law. It is, what do I always say is the opposite of rule of law? Arbitrary application of the law. Now, I'm not saying this is a law, but I'm saying they created this new set of cultural norms, cultural rules. You can't step outside our cultural rules, which are like the rules-based international order. You don't really know what they are. You just know that if they don't like you, you can step outside them. And if they do like you, there is no outside. They will not only, in the instance of Biden, not only did they refuse to take it, they actually fought against the claim. Why? Because they weren't making these claims against people because they were standing up for women. They made these claims for against people in service to the mainstream narrative. They wanted Joe Biden to win. They wanted first neocons or neoliberals or whoever it was they wanted to win. Whoever it was. They were acting in service to their ultimate political goals. And they were pretending that they were using how can I put this? That they had a moral standpoint here. They were taking a moral stance. You're mistreating this group. We're taking a moral stance to stand up for that group. Therefore, we're in the right and you got to be punished. And you will always notice they go after, it's very, very, very specific with the wokesters. They go after their enemies. And will they go after somebody on the inside every now and then? Yes, they will. I think they'll sacrifice somebody on the inside, or John Conyers. They took him out. They took John Conyers out. Why is that? John Conyers led the Out of Iraq caucus. John Conyers led the Out of Afghanistan caucus. John Conyers put in for Medicare for all. John Conyers put in for jobs for all and things of that nature. He wanted to cut the budget. John Conyers wanted to go after Bush and in 2004, 2005. When he had or was it 2006? 2006, I believe, when they took over the House and Senate, and he was the House Judiciary Committee chair. He wanted to go after Karl Rove. He wanted to go after Bush. Nancy Pelosi wouldn't let him do it. He told me to my face. John Conyers told me to my face that she wouldn't allow him she wouldn't let him do it. So bottom line was, he wanted to go after people for actual violations of the law, for people who had done things wrong, and they said no. But you let somebody stand up and misgender somebody, they got to go. Why? Because only if that person is already on the hit list. Joe Biden could misgender everybody all day long. Wouldn't matter. He's not on the hit list. Woke is it's not a moral position. It is a political tool that is used to attack your enemies. That's all it is. It's not a moral position. It is something that is it is a political weapon disguised as a moral position. We're standing up for this little guy. And how are we going to do that? By every chance we get taking our enemies out with the woke weapon. But we'll never use the woke weapon against any of our friends. We'll defend them if they violate everything that's woke. And in fact, there were people who went on Twitter and tweeted, I wouldn't care if Joe Biden, raped 87 nuns and did this and murdered and blah, blah, blah. I'd vote for him over Trump because Trump's so bad. In other words, you want Joe Biden to win. You don't really have a moral foundation. This is not about your moral beliefs, because you've said, I hate Trump because he's a crooked, rapist, murderer, killer, throat slasher, blah, blah, blah. But even if Joe Biden was the same murderer, killer, throat slasher, blah, 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 I'd vote for him. So all of those things don't bother you. It doesn't bother you. Those are things that are used when you have the ability to express your ideology, express your political narrative, support your ideology, and support your political narrative. That's all that is. It's to be used against your enemy. It's to be dismissed against your friends. That's the whole thing about wokeness, pretending to be doing things for the right reason when really all you're doing is the consistency is what tells you this. The consistency of watching the woke weapon, who it's used against, and why. At any given time. You remember Bernie Sanders? Bernie Sanders was when they felt that he was a threat and he was getting too big for his britches, he was a sexist and a racist and all that kinds of stuff. That's the game. Everybody's Trump's a sexist and a racist. I'm sure RFK Jr., you know that what's coming. He's a sexist and a racist and an anti-vaxxer and all that kind of stuff. These are things. The anti-vax thing, believe it or not, was really slipped into wokeness. It was stuck into the wokeness because it was treated as not a issue of science or medicine, but an issue of morality. Well, you got to get this or do this for a moral reason, to help your fellow man, blah, blah, blah. They would have to stretch it, but you're doing this to help your fellow man. You're doing it to look out for other people. So now it's a moral issue. It is no longer an issue of medicine or science. So if you discuss it from the perspective of medical or science, they would switch it over to the issue of morality. That's, I would say this, that is a fundamental foundation of wokeness, and that is to force a geopolitical discussion into the realm of morality, into the realm of right and wrong, good and bad, with the inference being that me and you are standing up for good, and we're pushing those who disagree with us are standing up for bad. Now let's talk about, ideologically speaking, how that is valuable to use for the perspective of ideology. One of the things that I've said, and you've probably heard me say this before, is I'm a lefty. But what do I mean by I'm a lefty? I'll put it to you like this. Some people think, oh, well, that means, now this is where wokeness has had its success. I'm a lefty means, oh, you believe in the, a woman is anybody that says they are, and all the things that, the wokesters believe. Why is that? Do people think that? Because one of the things that happened in America was this: as the Democratic Party moved to the right and the Republican Party, they both moved to the right, but the Democratic Party had to come up with a way of redefining where they are on the ideological spectrum, because they couldn't say we're moving to the right, that we're all moving over here to the right. So what the Democratic Party attempted to do was redefine left, right? So left, Garland Nixon says he's a lefty, and you know me, you've heard me. What does Garland Nixon mean? It means that he views politics through the lens of economic class, right? I said, when sometimes people will talk about race, well, what about American? Somebody asked me, what about black people, helping black people in America? And my inclination is to say, well, most black people in America, the vast majority of black people in America, fall in the economic class of the working class, the working poor, and the poor. So help those classes and you automatically help black folks, right? That's that. So but that's old school lefty. Old school lefties can be very, very conservative, culturally conservative. The old school lefties, you go to South America and it's very left, but they're very culturally conservative in South America. They're Marxists, they're Leninists, they're, left, old school lefties, right? They're socialists, but they can be very, very conservative, socially conservative. When you look at there and you look at the rules on gay marriage and the rules on abortion and things of that nature, South America and a lot of your socialist groups in the more traditional cultures, right? Africa, Latin America, Asia, things like that. In a lot of the more traditional cultures, they may be extremely left when it comes to socialism or when it comes to economic issues. But when it comes to cultural issues, they can be very, very culturally conservative. And so what happens in America is the discussion, the way we're misled is to believe that economic class is not an issue that we should even discuss. That to delineate a person being a conservative versus a liberal, we don't even, or the liberals call themselves progressives, right? But how do we do it? Well, if you believe in the whole woke, misgendering stuff, if that's your focus, and might I add, well, let me just say this, and that's it. You can hate labor unions. The traditional left is foundation in labor unions, right? You can hate the discussion of politics through the lens of economic class and all that kind of stuff. The discussion of a society where everything is focused on profit and whether or not that's in the best interest of all. Okay, you can have nothing but disdain and contempt for even that kind of conversation. But if you're down with the LGBTQ trans narrative, who's a woman narrative, right? If you're down with that kind of narrative, not the reality of it, but the narrative that is put forth by the oligarchs, then you're a member of the left. And a lot of conservatives in America that have been had, and they'll be like, yeah, there's this thing on these Bud Light commercials. That's the left. Because the neoliberals have been successful in redefining people's mind and repriming people's mind that when they think of left, only think of cultural specific, not just cultural issues, very specific cultural issues, very divisive cultural issues. And might I add, cultural issues that have been turned into weapons of geopolitics to smite their enemies. These tools are not valid. These weapons are not valid. If they were, they would use them against anyone. If they were real, they would say, well, my guy here, let's say it's Biden. Well, Biden's accused of doing something against women, and we stand for women. We have to look into that. But that ain't the fact. They say, how do we stop this? How do we put this down? How do we hide this allegation and assertion of a woke violation against Biden? That's the way they look at it, which means that none of it is real. It's all a geopolitical tool to smite your enemies. Look, over the course of time, I'm sure now Saudi Arabia they'll find all kinds of human rights violations in Saudi Arabia. But if you notice, nothing against Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia cut some guy up with a saw, and it was like, hey, we're chill with that. We ain't gonna get involved, right? And then, but meanwhile, here's the same thing. Russia arrested Navalny and locked him out. Well, wait a minute. Your partner cut a guy out with a bone saw. You don't have a problem with that. Another Russia convicted Navalny and his brother of literally extorting like $300,000 or something crazy in that range from a French cosmetic company. Look it up. But we got to stand up for a friggin' guy who's got a history of like almost neo-Nazism, who like calls Muslims terrible names. You would think, if in fact that wokeness was a valid and a secure set of moral beliefs that they had, that they would look at Navalny and say, we can't, because the guy referred to Muslims in a way that's unacceptable, and he's far right past and all that. No thanks. But the reality was, people like Navalny exposes wokeism for what it is. It is, you see now the double standard. You see the contradiction. You say to yourself, okay, you're standing up for the little guy and you're standing up against the person who mistreats minorities, right? Yeah. And they say, we love of Navalny. And you say, wait a minute, the guy literally referred to Muslim as cockroaches or rats or something and said we should use guns to eliminate him. He basically called for genocide. That's your boy? And they say, yeah, we don't forget all that. He's our boy. Because they don't really care. That's it. Navalny. In fact, what's interesting too about the woke crew is that when you beware of the company you keep, right? Do not be misled. Bad association spoils useful habits, right? When you look, and isn't this interesting? The woke people create a great contradiction, because the other thing that's interesting is the woke people also align themselves with the most treacherous, racist, brutal, vicious characters in the world, who clearly stand in opposition to what they espouse to believe in. Syria. So the wokesters got to stand up against the side, and who are they aligned with? Literal al-Nusra Front, the Army of Islam, on and on and on, with actual jihadists, head chopping, people who made women sex slaves, you name it. And the wokesters are aligned with them to stop the evil Assad. Now, go to Ukraine. Literal Nazis, people with Hitler tattoos all over them, copies of Mein Kampf, people who are unabashed Nazis, unapologetic Nazis, and the woke crew are all over them. And these people hate gays. Let me tell you something. If the Nazis were in charge in Ukraine, were in charge of that place, and there was any gay people around, they're done. Their heads cut off, their machine gun, they're finished. Okay, don't think they are anything but woke. But the wokesters are aligned with them. The same people who stand up and say, we're standing up for minorities and gays and this group and that group, right? Got a blue and yellow flag on. Have an Azov patch. They could go out buy an Azov patch. The Azov patch, the one before the State Department forced them to change it, literally had a Nazi insignia, it had the Nazi icon on it. So the bottom line is this: any number of battalions in Ukraine are totally and completely adorned with the iconography of that distasteful ideology associated with the man from Austria in the 1930s and 40s, shall we say, right? And the wokesters, they're in the same way. See, and this is the giveaway. In the same way, the wokesters are like, oh no, Garland Nixon said something about an LGBTQ person, or something about a woman that we didn't like, or he couldn't tell us the definition of a woman in the proper amount of time. He must go down. He must suffer. He must be, the beast must die. Somebody get a rope. While they're there on me, their so-called enemy, right? They're lining right up next to the you-know-whats. And so the world can now look at them. And what's beautiful is we've seen recently some film from some of the Africans who are being interviewed by the BBC and interviewed by other people who are letting us know that they're hip to it, who are saying, I see these blatant contradictions between what you say and what you do, between your practices. and your speech. That's what the Africans are saying. That's what you might have seen the BBC guy, the South African ANC, one of their leaders was talking to a guy from the BBC, and the guy says, uh, don't you, denounce Putin, and can you work with him? He's got complaints against him from the International Criminal Court for genocide." And the guy says, "Oh yeah, where's the weapons of mass destruction? What are you guys doing to address the people? What about Tony Blair? What to address the people that dragged you guys into war, that murdered people and killed Gaddafi, all based on lies? What are you doing? We see who you are." He just said, "Come on, colonizer." That's about what he said to the BBC guy. "Look here, colonizer. Don't lie to us. We see what you're doing." And at the end, he made an interesting statement. The guy said, "We understand what this war is about." At that point, that was what he said. Everything. What he's saying is, we know what you guys are up to. You're trying to do. You're trying to surround Russia and take Russia over. You're trying to do to Russia what you've done to us in Africa. That's what he's really saying. So here the United States wants to go to Africa and say, "We're on your side. We love you." Oh, really? What happened during apartheid? The United States literally called we're talking to a guy from the ANC, right? The African National Congress or whatever it is. During apartheid, the United States literally named that group as a terrorist organization and named Nelson Mandela as a terrorist. And you want to come back now and say, "Oh, you have to join us against Russia"? Yeah, that's not happening. The people in Africa are hip to it. That wokeness bounced right off of them. They're like, "Nah, we're not buying that at all. Sorry." And number one, and number two, they are a traditional society. And let's just say the traditional societies are not where the neoliberal societies are when it comes to issues of LGBTQ and things like that. It is what it is. You can like it, you cannot like it. It doesn't matter. The more traditional societies are not there. That's a reality. To me, when you're navigating politics in the world, if you are a diplomat, right? If you're, and this is an important thing. This is then I'm getting ready to go into something from this. Go right into something else. If you are a diplomat, then you have to understand how to talk to other people of other countries. You got to understand where they're coming from. You got to understand how they see right and wrong and their moral positions. You can't just simply say, "We believe this, therefore you have to believe it." See, one of the things that's important, I think one of the reasons that Russia and China are getting along much better with, and let me say this, they're getting along so much better with Africa and Latin America and the Muslim region of the world, right? Middle East. I think part of it is because they're very, very old societies, right? They're old societies, that they're very large societies. They have their own way of doing things for thousands of years. They have traditions and cultures that they enjoy and they're proud of, and they don't care whether you like it or not. So Africa sees Russia and they say, Russia's got a long, deep history that goes back thousands of years. China, look how long this has been a nation, for God's sake, thousands of years. They see these long, rich histories, right? And they say, whether we agree with anything you guys do or not, we respect that you have an old and long and rich culture. And we want to make sure that we don't offend you by saying or doing something that you would find offensive in your culture. See, a true diplomat comes to the South America, to Muslim world, and says, "Oh, I want to make sure that I keep my feet down. I don't want to cross my legs because I don't want to face the bottom of my feet towards someone and it be offensive," right? I don't want to do. There's different cultures. A true diplomat wants to understand. I'll put it like this: the true diplomat does not come to your country and say, "I want to make deals with you," and you say, "Okay, well, let's talk." And they say, "Okay, there's certain things we believe in our culture. You got to believe them too, whether you like it or not." That's not diplomacy. A diplomat says, "We're coming to your culture, and I want to learn the things that you believe and make sure that I don't offend you." Right? This is your culture. This is your country. I'm coming to your country asking for you to help me. I want to make sure that I respect your culture, respect the way you do things, whether or not we do things, and then we can get our whatever we need done. You got lithium. You want to sell lithium. We want to buy lithium. We're coming here to respect you and to make a deal for your lithium. The problem is the U.S. doesn't do that. The U.S. empire and its colonialist vassals, they got another way of doing things, and that is, we're coming to you with our way of doing business. We call it capitalism. Now it's neoliberal capitalism. We call it capitalism. And some country says, nah, we want to be socialist or whatever the hell. I don't care what they want to be. They want to be anarchist, whatever, right? So the country says we want to be socialist. The US says, well, you can't be socialist, or we'll try to take you out. Well, wait a minute. That's one of the problems with the US. That's one of the problems with neoliberalism. In the same way, that's why I say this aligns with neoliberalism and neoconservatism. Neoliberalism says we do this fake free market thing. And so we have to go around the world and spread it and say, you're going to do it, you're going to do it. And if you say, nah, that's not the way, oh, you've got to cut programs for your poor people. And if they say we don't want to do it, and you have to do it, and if you don't do the things that we want, we're going to punish you. It is the Borg. Resistance is futile. We're going to come to your country. I don't care what your, we're going to evaluate your cultures based on the reference point that we have. And then we're going to tell you, you can't have that culture that you've had thousands of years because we don't like it. Nah, that's not working for us on LGBTQ, gay, whatever people. So you're going to have to change it. Whereas Russia and China come in and they say, look, we got stuff to sell. We got some gas. You want to buy it? Or you got gas, we'd like to buy it. And you say, yeah. And they say, how much? $5? $5 a gallon it is. Shake hands. Nah, boom. Hey, we need some infrastructure built. Russia or China says, all right, we'll do that. We'll knock this off the price. You make a deal. You build the infrastructure. You're doing what? They ain't standing around asking you what you're doing with your LGBTQ community. Right? Now, understand something. That's not to say, in my opinion, that we should just say, ignore and just say anybody, like this country, when everybody turns 19, they eat them. That's not that you should say, well, that's fine. Yeah, if you eat everybody when they turn 20, it's okay with us. It's okay to say, well, that's immoral. And then to go to the UN and say to the UN, we find that immoral. We'd like to talk to that country. We'd like to bring in other countries. The international community should talk about that and should talk to this other country and see what the international community wants to do. The National Security Council, the UN Security Council, which, might I add, what is it? US, France, Germany, Russia, China. It's like 4 of the 5 are or 4 of the 6, I think, are like Western. Why in the hell, how come Brazil, the 5th largest country with the 5th largest population in the world, ain't on that? How come not Africa? How come the Middle East? How come some countries on the Middle East, or the Arab Union, or the African Union, or the Arab League, or some of those countries, how come they don't have somebody on there? I think it's only fair. It's only fair if you have the UN Security Council that the Africans and the Muslims and the Latin Americans, everybody should be represented. And that's not saying they should be represented because they're African, Black, or Latino, red, or whatever color it is. It's to say there are various regions of the world. And from a perspective, if you're for democracy, that would be international democracy, where all regions of the world, right? I'm not saying, well, you have to do it because they're Muslim. No, they have a powerful and important region of the world with important natural resources. It's fair that they have a say at the UN Security Council. The UN Security Council was Western puppets, and luckily the Russians and Chinese got in, so there'd be a couple others. But overall, it was set up by the West for the West, and there's some changes need to be made. But the whole neoliberal thing rests on one very particular foundational argument. And what is that? If you think about it, that the US, from the geopolitical international perspective, you talk about it from the perspective of what's going on inside the country is one thing, but from the geopolitical perspective, it all rests on the foundation that the US has a right, dare I say a duty, to export its culture around the world. So now so again, what does it go with? It goes with the US saying we're the shining city on the hill. We are the leaders of the world. We're smarter than everybody. We're more moral than everybody. So that means we have the authority as our culture changes. So the US doesn't have gay marriage, and all these other countries doesn't have gay marriage. So the US wakes up one day and says, I think we're going to legalize gay marriage. So they do it. Okay, yeah, whatever. The courts decided, it is what it is, right? At that point, the US has made a decision to change something culturally. Now they then go to other countries. Hey, we've made a decision to change something culturally. And the other country says, yeah, well, goody for you. And they say, well, I don't think you understand. You have to make that decision too. And that country says, It took you 250 years to make that decision. So what do you mean we got to make the decision right now? It took 250 years for you to make that decision. Come back and see us in 249 and a half years and we'll talk to you. Right? So the US then makes a cultural decision, spur of the moment as it may be, but then suddenly decides to go to other countries and say, you got to go along with this decision it took us 250 years to make. And they don't want to hear it. But because those of us who know the truth know that even that's a fraud. Because they're not going to go to a country, let's say Kuwait or something, right? Whether these countries where the women have to wear the black burqas and all that stuff, and they have no rights, and gay people get hanged. But if they're selling them the oil at the price they want, and they're going along with the vassals doing what they're told, the United States ain't going to go to that country and say you're not treating the gay people or the whatever group right, the Christians or whoever, who cares? They ain't going to say that. What they're going to say is, if you're doing what we want, they're going to say nothing. Here's some more money. Here's some more weapons. Keep up the good work. And then they're going to go next door and say, oh, hey, we want to give you money and weapons so you can do what we want. And they say, we're not going to do what you want, even if you give us money and weapons. Well, look at that. You're treating your group of fill in the blank people wrong. I think there's a genocide. I think we might have to go in and overthrow your country. I think we might have to sanction you until the people get so starving, hungry, they overthrow the government, which they probably won't, but we don't care because we've created destabilization and poverty to a government that is not fully compliant to us, that wants some level of independence and sovereignty. There you go. Let's be honest about this thing. That's what it is. It's all lies. Wokeness is just another tool. Look, Tony Blinken's like, yes, around the world at all of our embassies now, we're going to have like a Black Lives Matter flag and a rainbow flag. But the question becomes, okay, you put up a couple of flags. How does that help these groups? Of what benefit is it? You got black folks, you got people in America complaining about things, right? And yet you're saying we're going to go halfway across the world and put up a flag. That'll help you. And you got people right here saying, I'm living in a tent. I'm living in a tent here. I got no job. I got no health care. I got 3 kinds of cancer. I got high blood pressure and this and that and all these kind of things and no health care. And I'm living in a tent. What are you going to do, United States? I'm a 48-year veteran living in a tent with 5 different kinds of illnesses and no health care. I'm just screwed. What do I do? And the U.S. is, oh, we got you covered. What are we going to do? We're going to go over this country that we want to steal their stuff from, and we're going to tell them that they're mistreating their LGBTQ people, so that we can hopefully overthrow their government and steal their lithium. That's our plans to help you. My point being, these woke proclamations of support or disdain for any other country does nothing ever to help the so-called prospective marginalized groups. The intent is never to help the marginalized group. You know, I was listening to you've heard of the Uhuru, the African People's Socialist Parties that they're going after, right? And they're like, oh, you're puppets of Russia, because their position is the United States and the colonial powers is going after Russia. What do they say? They say they got a right to say what they believe. And their position is everybody should support Russia because the colonial powers are all attacking and going after Russia like they do everybody else. So the position of the African People's Socialist Party is you should support Russia over the colonial powers, right? Their position is what else? Hey, black folks will never get a fair price treatment. Nobody's going to help you. White government's going to help you. You got to go out and build your own, create your own, feed yourself, educate yourself, take care of yourself, because they ain't going to help you, right? Well, the reality of it is this. Anybody who hears that is going to say that ain't crazy and cockamamie. Whether you agree with them, or they say they hate the Democratic Party. Nah, the Democrats are sellouts. They'll never do anything for us. We need to run our own people and get our own political. That's political independence. It's political independence. So the United States goes after them and tries to take them out. But what if you listen to them? What do they say? So I was listening to Kim Iverson had the guy Omali Yeshiteli. I've interviewed him before. The guy from the and that fits in with this stuff here. Particularly, it fits well in with this discussion. And it was, yes, Omali Yeshiteli. You know, what do you believe in? And blah blah blah. So he went on about what they believe in. And what do you do? Well, there was a very poor black community, and they didn't have recreation. We had some a bunch of white people that helped us, that we talked to, and they helped give us money, and they worked with us too. And we raised 125,000 and built this nice basketball court recreation in a poor Black community. We also built these stores so that people in Black communities could get fresh vegetables. And then they were hired in those stores, so we provided jobs. And we said, when you listen to what he said, I'm like, yeah, it's nothing wrong with that. Good too. So it's what they're saying is we're actually doing things tangibly to say, we're in this poor community and we opened a store and we hired people. They had another thing where they opened this big, like restaurant kitchen thing. And what they hired Black people who got out of prison. They gave them a job there and they said, and we're training them culinary skills so they can, to be cooks or whatever, so they can go out and get a job. So here's the bottom line. They're not on Twitter finding someone on Twitter to, hey, you're a Trump supporter, you're a white supremacist, you're a whatever, we've got to attack you on Twitter. No, they're on the ground in actual poor neighborhoods, finding a person that got out of jail saying, we got a job for you, but we're going to train you some skills so hopefully you can move forward and have a fresh opportunity in life. Which is better? And now, what happens? The wokesters see the African People's Socialist Party, who are on the ground doing physical things to help poor people, who are literally saying the wokesters, the neoliberal, ain't never going to do nothing to help us poor Black folks. We're going to do it ourselves. Screw them. That's what they're saying. And they're kind of right, if you want the truth. The neoliberals ain't doing nothing to help anybody but themselves. So they say that. But they also say, I think Russia's getting treated wrong. And I think these neoliberals are going after Russia. Everybody should support Russia. So what do the neoliberals do? They go after the people that are doing what they claim they're doing. They claim we're trying to help the Black people. Well, then why do you want to arrest somebody who's helping poor Black folks that got out of prison to have a job, to make a few dollars, and to get culinary skills to go get a further job, to help bring somebody out of poverty? You want to arrest that group, and you want to put them in jail, and so they can't continue doing that and stop them and accuse them. The Russians must have told them to do it and try to make it look like they're some kind of outrageous maniacs, non-violent, no weapons, never done anything. No, they're not in favor of violence. They do nothing violent, never accused of anything violent. But yet, the wokesters want to arrest those people and want to lock them up. And then they're going to run around the world saying, I'm here to help this group or that group. And the people that are actually on the ground trying to help poor people, they're going to lock them up. Because the Uhuru people are saying, these wokesters ain't going to do nothing for you. The Democratic Party ain't going to do nothing. You got to get out from under them. You've been supporting these people all this time. That's what they say. You've been supporting these Democrats for all these years and they're doing nothing for you. Get out of there. And look out for yourself, right? Try to build your own. At least they'll have to come crawling back to you if you don't support them. But try to get some. So whether you agree, I'm not saying that's my position. I'm not saying it isn't my position. I'm saying for the purpose of this discussion, whether you agree with that or not, they got a right to say it. And they are physically doing things in poor communities that the neoliberals ain't doing, which is actually helping poor people. So when you look at the woke thing, even in their own, I know people who are in what I would consider Democratic Party style groups and organizations, or organizations that are either affiliated with or support the Democratic Party, that still believe that the Democratic Party can be fixed from the inside out, right? I know people that are in groups that work with them, that are trying to drive them, that, I may not believe that they're corrigible, but people that believe that they are. I know people that are in groups like that have been attacked with woke stuff, simply because maybe somebody disagrees with them. They have a disagreement with like a female person in their organization, and the female person, I think he's attacking me. I feel attacked because I'm a woman, and it had nothing to do with that. But there's a disagreement, and now, well, that's an easy tool to beat somebody up with. And now you're inside in an organization that pretends to, and maybe really does. Maybe your group or organization really wants to stand up for all groups and minorities. But the problem is with wokeness is not designed for introspection and self-awareness. When the woman says, that guy, I feel like I've been attacked, it feels like violence. What did he say to you? He told me I was talking too much. Were you talking too much? That's not important right now. He attacked me. He only said that because I was a woman, and he should be mistreated for that. In a society of fairness, you say, well, present your evidence. You say he mistreated you because you're a woman. What did he say? He said I was talking too much. Was okay. He talked to everybody. Does anybody else feel she was talking too much? Yes, we all feel she was talking too much. We dismiss your claim. He made a claim against a woman, but it was a valid claim. It's like this. I've been through this where we've been talking about Kamala on interviews, and I'll say she's a terrible politician, and I think she's atrocious as a politician. I think that she is. I'm not going to say what her mental intellectual processing capability is, but she does not come across as very bright. She's at minimum, she's very poor. The cameras hate her. She's a very pretty woman, but the cameras hate her because she has to open her mouth and she starts bubbling and bambling and stumbling. And what the hell is she talking about? So I'm like, she's terrible as a politician. How can you think that it's a good idea to run this lady? And here's what they go to. Well, Garland, certainly women of color are judged differently than. No, don't tell me that. I want to hear it. I'm simply saying, based on my political evaluations, and that includes her polling numbers. So you're going to tell me that a person who ran for president had to quit before the race even started because she was looking so bad. Her poll numbers are horrific. They're still horrific. She has made an idiot out of herself time and time again in front of the camera. And now you're saying to me, because of all of those things, even though all of those things that happened, if I begin to evaluate her as a politician, then I have to take into account that she's a woman and somehow give her a pass, or that if I say I don't like her politics and I think she's a poor politician, then what the argument is women aren't judged as fairly, because that implies I'm not judging her fairly. But what that does is this. It is here's the way I put it. It's a counterattack disguised as a defense, right? If I say, I think that Kamala Harris is a terrible politician, and someone says, well, she's misjudged and mistreated because she's a woman. Now I have to defend myself. Well, I didn't do it because she's a woman. I ain't doing that. Well, people who do have to think about the fact that she's a woman of color and they're mistreated. You know what? My next thing is well, she's a terrible politician as a woman of color. She is not a good representation for women of color in politics. Well, women of color get mistreated, and judged differently. She's bad. And it's a mistake to run. See what I mean? I'm not going to bite the hook and talk about whether or not I'm wrong for evaluating her as a bad politician because she's a person of color, because that didn't enter into my evaluation. So there's no point in me commenting on it. All I'll simply say is this. Bottom line is, she's bad, she's horrible, she stinks. She's terrible. She's a horrible politician. And the Democratic Party they're not making a mistake in running her. That's what they want. They don't want somebody who's competent. Somebody who's competent might stand up, might ask a question every now and then, might say, why are we doing this? Might say, this is not a good idea. They don't want somebody that's going to say this. There's a reason that when you look around the West, you see Olaf Scholz, you see Annalena Baerbock, you see Liz Truss and Bojo. You see these clowns. You see these lunatics. You see these ruling elite puppets. There's a reason that you see these people who are so frighteningly incompetent, because that's what the people in power want. They just want a cardboard cutout of a politician so they can stand on the other side of the person and put a foghorn on the other side, to put a megaphone on the other side and scream the policies that they want into this person's ear, and they'll come out of their mouth. So they don't care about that. Joe Biden don't know what's going on. I had a discussion with a very dear friend of mine, and the discussion was, is Joe Biden really incompetent, and his goose is cooked, as some of us think, or is he dumb like a fox, and he's kind of has some issues, but he's still enacting his horrific policies, the things that he wants to do. Here's what I have to say. It doesn't matter. My answer is it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if Joe Biden is his mind is as sharp as it was as when he was 21, or it doesn't matter if he's confused and he doesn't even know his name anymore. That doesn't matter because the policies won't be any different. If he is completely unable to say a word, the people that push the policies through will push him through, and he'll just kind of wave his hands and they'll say push him through. If he craps out tomorrow and what's her name, Kamala Harris becomes president, the policies are still the same. If in fact he stays for however many more years, they're the same. It doesn't matter. These are not Joe Biden's policies. They are in a way. They are in that these are policies, the policies of neoliberalism and neoconservatism he agrees with. So they are his policies in that, yes, he agrees with that. In that, if you got 10 Catholic people and they're all saying the same prayer, is it any individual one of them's prayer? No, they're all Catholic and it's a Catholic prayer. So the bottom line is neoliberal. The policies that come out are neoliberal policies. They're all a bunch of neoliberals, and you're getting all the same policies that any given one would give you. So it doesn't matter. Joe Biden is not the issue or the problem. The problem is the ideology that is guiding, that is maintaining course and speed for disaster with the leadership of the U.S. So that's where we are right now. All right, and so the my point being, when you get at the wokey ideology, when you get at what it really is, sum it all up, it's just a tool. It's just something that the people in charge can use to maintain a narrative, to get you distracted. So you're talking about issues other than economic class. You're not talking about what's going on internationally. You're not asking them when they say we want to intervene in country X, because the question in your mind is why? Oh, because they're not treating the women correctly, the LGBTQ community, whoever. They're not creating some. We'll make up a minority group in that country if they don't have one. If they're all exactly the same, we'll come up with something. Or worst come to worst, we'll just come up with a couple people. Alexei Navalny, Pussy Riot, whoever, right? We'll come up with a couple of dissidents, and then we'll say that we will manufacture a dissident. And then we'll say, and that dissident is being treated wrong. And so we're standing up for the dissident. So if we don't have any other minorities, then we'll just make up a dissident and say we're standing up for that dissident and pretend really that that's part of the woke culture. We will, like Navalny, right? He is integrated into the woke culture. So to support Navalny is the same as supporting, I don't know, the LGBTQ issue in Afghanistan. It's the same thing. To support the Azov battalion is the same as supporting the LGBTQ issue in Afghanistan. You have a group that has a set of policies that are aligned, that are contradictory. That's what you have with woke. You have this great contradiction. You have a contradictory set of policies that are applied as a suite, as a group. So the policies, we stand up for minorities and the LGBTQ and the oppressed and people who are mistreated by authoritarianism, people who are mistreated by communism, things of that nature. We're already standing up for people who are mistreated by somebody. On the other side, we are going to try to wink and nod as we support some of the most brutal, vicious, murderous groups on earth, including jihadist groups and actual fascist in Ukraine, actual swastika tattooed, a Mein Kampf reading, goose stepping fascist. And therein goes the contradiction, the two big contradictions. The first being, how do you align your support for treating minority groups fairly worldwide with your support for a neo-Nazi regime, and for at minimum a regime with extremely significant neo-Nazi input and power that the U.S. actually empowered? How do you align those two things? And number two, how do you align arguing that you stand for fairness and equal treatment for everyone. And look, this is because if you talk about wokeness, if you said, Garland, what would wokeness be to you? And I would say every human being on earth has the same expectation of rights. Every country, everything, everybody has the same expectation of rights. That would be what I would say. We have universal rights, never a hierarchical system of rights. So how do you align that with wokeism, where from one perspective you say everybody should have the same expectation of rights, everybody should be punished the same if they offend various groups and sundry groups, and then as soon as Tara Reid says, oh yeah, you're from woke and Me Too and all that, yes, all right, well, I got a Me Too complaint against Joe Biden. He's our guy. He's our guy. That only goes against our enemies. So how do you make sense? How does the world make sense of that other great contradiction where you arbitrarily apply the rules of wokeness to your enemies only? And you literally come out and say, I don't care if Biden did all the things that Trump did. A number of the liberal class came out and said that. I don't care if he did all the things that Trump did. I'd still vote for him, which is just to show that your whole thing is a fraud. These are all just various ways that you would go after Trump. One of them is lawfare. I believe they're using lawfare right now. They're going after him every which way, and they're combining really lawfare with wokeness. We're going to go after him for a claim that a woman made, and as an example here, what did they do? What did they do? If you look at what happened with this latest lawsuit, there was a woman who had a Me Too claim against Trump from long, long ago, but it was past the statute of limitations. So the New York legislature went in session and changed the statute of limitations for 1 year and said, okay, if anybody has a complaint against somebody for like some sexual thing that happens to be past the statute of limitations, they can go after that person, but only for 1 year. And might I add, the woman E. Jean Carroll was part of pushing for that legislation. So to get Trump, they literally passed a law that said for 1 year, anyone who has a complaint against somebody, that's the statute of limitations would preclude that complaint. We will put the statute of limitations aside for 1 year, and that person can then file their lawsuit. And what do you know? The next day, E. Jean Carroll filed her lawsuit immediately. I think it was like within minutes. I think it was like the law went into effect at 12, and she filed a lawsuit against Trump at like 12:01. That was, so again, did they care? Oh, this woman's been claimed to be a rape victim, blah, 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 blah. No, very specifically for one person to smite their enemy, they changed their enemy, Trump, they changed the law to go after him. It's lawfare. So in this instance, they used lawfare, it was the woke model of lawfare. Remember when they went after Julian Assange, it was these claims. Now they said there was claims that he raped. There's never been claims of rape or sexual assault. And then they said he's a rapist, he's sexual assaulted, but there's never been a claim of rape and sexual assault. There was a complaint, a discussion by some women as to whether or not he would voluntarily use a condom. They had voluntary sex between two people for like a week. He stayed in a woman's house for like a week, and afterwards, and then stayed in another woman's house for like a week and had voluntary sex with these people. And then later on, apparently the police approached them and they said they didn't want to file any complaints. Well, the police then, pushed this thing, and they got out the rumor that Assange raped someone, and then the allegations just disappeared. But he got locked up for that. But the allegations got disappeared, and he's still locked up. So the bottom line is this: that Julian Assange, what happened? It was, you're doing something to a woman. It started off with using that cultural thing. We have to protect women by going after Assange, when it was the deep state going after him. So that's it. All right. So let's look. Oh, Kinky 2. There's Kinky 2. Okay, let me see. Hold on a second. Look, I know I shut up here, guys. I am actually trying to get to the beginning so I can see. Okay, I'm going through super chats. I hate to go quiet like that on you guys, but I got focused for a minute. So we usually get some pretty good questions in super chat. Let's go. Woke is a shtick. You hit someone when you lose rationality. Exactly. It's a stick. It's nothing but a weapon. Very, very, very good point. Very good point. When you got nothing else, you just use that weapon. All right, here's where we're going. Nat Turner says, it's overtly apparent you're terrified to speak up for Black folks. I was excited to find a brother discussing geopolitics. Your effort to walk on eggshells is really disappointing. Years of law enforcement will do that to you. Interesting, Nat Turner. I'm terrified to speak up for Black folks. I'm okay, fine. I mean, if he wants to believe that. Let me just say this. I try to maintain, Nat Turner, I try to maintain context. If I'm talking about something specific, I stay within the context of what I'm talking about. I'm not here to, quote, speak up for Black folks or not speak up for Black folks. This is not about Black folks. This is about the woke ideology. And I don't want to get sidestepped into speaking up for a group, speaking up for Black folks, speaking up for white folks, speaking up for the LGBT community. I'm not here to speak up for anybody. This is a discussion about the geopolitics of the woke ideology. So when I describe things, I try to describe things in an unbiased way as I can, almost a clinical and in a scientific way. So I can say, I want to talk about this, but I'm not going to get caught up in any particular. Somebody could say, well, you won't stand up for the LGBTQ community or stand up for this community. I'm not here to speak up for anybody in this particular discussion. I'm here to stay focused, to keep my eyes on what I'm talking about, and that is the woke ideology and how it affects the world geopolitically. So discussing your effort to walk on eggshells. I don't understand even what you mean walking on eggshells. There's no eggshells to walk on as far as I'm concerned. I mean, that's a metaphor that doesn't apply here. There's nothing for me to walk on. I just say what I have to say relative to the particular subject at hand. Okay, so next, okay. So, but thank you very much. I certainly appreciate it. And I appreciate the conversation, and I'm glad I got a chance to answer it. All right. Sparky, great work, Garland. That's why what I'm talking about, say the Uhuru movement and what they believe. I don't say I believe it. I don't say I don't believe it. I say you can believe it or choose not to believe it as you choose for the for the the purpose of this discussion. I don't want to get it away from the foundation that we're talking about. BBC guy wasn't condescending enough to South Africa. Thanks a lot, Sparky. All right. Sparky says, when I was in the Army 40 years ago, the general rule was to meet the foreign person culturally halfway. They know you're different and appreciate your effort. It may be different now. I don't know. Yeah, I agree with you. See, here's the thing, Sparky, because you're talking about trying to meet a person halfway means that you'll respect them. I'm going to respect your culture, as opposed to I have to make you accept my culture. I'm not meeting you halfway. You're not doing the things I want you to do. You got to start doing them. Right? That's an arrogant way to say, tell other people they got to live the way you tell them they have to live. What you're saying is meet them halfway. Look, I got a particular a culture. You got a culture. Let's respect each other, and I'll respect yours. I'm not saying mine is superior to yours. Wokeness is an actual. It is a claim of that your culture is superior to the other ones. Next, Bad Dude Corn Pop says, off topic, what do you think of John Kerry calling for farmers to stop producing food to save the planet? Yeah, well, I mean, it depends on what you save the planet from. Humans. If he feels the farmers want to stop, that humans are the problem, then stopping producing food will get it done. Yeah, that'll get it done. We'll eliminate the problem. So some argue that the ruling elite kind of sees that as an issue. And might I add, yeah, well, is he going to ask his wife to get rid of her money and stop making ketchup? Hey, we're going to show you. We'll start by closing down all our ketchup factories and stop those hundreds of millions of dollars that we're get out of here with that, John Kerry. Thanks a lot. Good one. 31 million tons of gold are in Uganda. Oh, that needs to be stolen. Those people need a whole lot of democracy. How about we go to Cobb fan? Wokeism has become fake concern for human rights. Exactly. And values while actually doing the opposite. Exactly, Cobb fan. It is fake concern for human rights. I got brilliant people here. Cobb fan is on top of it right there. That brother there or sister, I don't know who Cobb fan is. It doesn't tell us exactly what Gender. All right. How about we go here? Bella says, thank you for speaking to the truth in this crazy world. Thank you for your hard work. Happy Memorial Day, Garland. Great analysis is all. Thank you very much, Bella. I certainly appreciate that. Oh, wow. $50. Thanks, Bella. And okay, here we go. Finn Boy Slick says, well, I'm here to speak up for Garland's show and forget eggshells. I'm walking on sunshine. Oh, man. Katrina in the waves. Okay, we got a couple people. John Ball, thank you for a tip. And Lori Lamb, hey, Lori out in Colorado says, Garland Nixon is certainly not one who walks on eggshells. Exactly. Look, let me tell you something. If I walked on eggshells, I'd be real concerned with how the mainstream media views me. How that's why I left mainstream media. I was in mainstream media. I left mainstream media because I wanted to say what I had to say. And as far as I'm concerned, I feel like I'm in a position here on YouTube that I don't have to walk on eggshells. I can say anything I want. I think what Nat Turner doesn't understand is this. Nat Turner doesn't understand how I do things, right? With me, it is I make a effort to stay on the subject that I'm talking about and to find things that are relative to that subject. And I make an effort not to drift into idiosyncrasies within what I'm talking about. When I talked about everything that was going on, when I talked about the Uhuru movement, one of the things was I was using that as an example of the opposite of wokeness, right? I was saying, hey, they're doing a bunch of stuff here. And I'll always say this about any group, agree with them or not. I'm not going to say I agree or disagree, or there's plenty I agree with. I'm a lefty, of course. So you know where I'm coming from. But my point is, you can agree with them or not. I'm making this particular point. And the point that I was making was not contingent upon whether people agree with ideologically or even strategically or tactically with the Uhuru movement. It was a point made on understanding the Uhuru movement, who was actually on the street, whatever you think of them, doing something to help poor people. And people that they said were standing up for this group, and they were doing things physically to help the group, as opposed to the wokesters who say, we're standing up for this group. And you say, what are you going to do? We're going to throw some poor guy off Twitter. That's going to help the group. It ain't going to help the group. It ain't going to get them food. It ain't going to get them jobs. It ain't going to get them nothing. So what I was talking about in the context of the wokeness, the difference between somebody who's generally doing something that stands up for the ideology they espouse versus people who are inconsistent and contradictory in what they do, and that reveals that they're not genuine in their claims that they're standing up for any particular group or all particular groups. How's that? All right. Let's go. Zach says, I recently heard someone bringing it back to extreme political correctness. I like that in some cases, removes the ability to reflectively defend, right? It's the term you want to use. Political correctness was the old term, right? You're being politically correct. And in a way, political correctness could in itself be similar to wokeness, because there were people on the right who used the term political correctness at times to block a valid conversation on minorities or something. Look, that's a conversation that's reasonable to be had. It should be a conversation that is based on critical thinking, historical fact, and empirical data that you have, right? And there's stuff out there. So it's not that a conversation about these things shouldn't be had. It absolutely should be had. So a lot of times the term political correctness, if somebody brought up some of the things historically that the Uhuru movement brought up, people would be mad at them and say, oh, that's political correctness. Well, if they're bringing up data and evidence and things like that, no, it's not. But people would use that term political correctness to dismiss arguments that were valid, that had a lot of strength, that were empirical arguments, that were critical discussions involving critical thinking. So yes, political correctness, I think, was something that used to be used more by conservatives to swat a discussion about anything to do with race or gender or stuff that maybe somebody might want to have a real conversation about. I don't know about the gender stuff. I don't even know that much about that. I'm not into that. But it was political correctness was the term that was used sometimes to stop that. Now, wokeness, I think, is something different than the term political correctness. I think political correctness at times could be a blocking phrase, whereas in and of itself, wokeness is a very assertive, sharp violent tool that's used to smite your enemies. It is a very, very valuable tool that's used to justify violence. It's used to justify supporting unsavory groups and characters, and it's used to justify taking out your enemies. And then it is ignored when those types of accusations go against your compadres. Anything else? I think that may be it, and I think that's it. All righty. Oh, we got one more person. Uh, uh, Thanks for talking about Assange tonight, Garland. Easy to agree with your geo woke take too. Take good care, huh? You're only more valuable all the time. Thanks a lot, Rob Juno. I'll end by saying this. Let me thank everybody. Make sure I didn't miss anybody. Thank everybody. And patreon.com is available if you can do anything to help the channel. It's certainly appreciated. Oh, Nat Turner's again. Let's see what he says. I was speaking about the original definition of the word woke. You know its origins, and you chose intentionally not to share to make others comfortable. I respect you, your program and analysis. That's why I watch. Have a good evening, sir. I know its origins, and I chose not to share to make others comfortable. I told as much as I know. If I knew more about its origins, I'd say it. That's what I know. I really haven't dug into the whatchamacallit. But if Nat Turner feels as though I knew something and I immediately initially hit it to make others comfortable, oftentimes those things are projecting things that we think or believe, fears that we have. I think, I'm just going to throw this out there. I think Nat Turner has a fear, and a lot of people do have this fear, and it's a valid fear, that people of their group or that Black people or people who get a voice are going to betray them, right? Based on the Black leaders in the United States, anybody who felt like their leaders are going to betray them have every right to believe that. So if Nat Turner looks at me and he says he's just like Hakeem Jeffries and whoever, Barack Obama, just like the rest of them betrayed us, he's going to betray him too. I ain't going to get mad at Nat Turner, because after all the betrayal of these backstabbing traitors in our community that are in the Democratic Party and the Republican Party and all that are in it, that are in government everywhere, I would understand Nat Turner or anybody else who sees a Black person and says, I think that person's going to betray me. You've been betrayed by all of these clowns, so I can't even get mad at him for thinking that. So I love you, Nat Turner, and I understand where you're coming from. Sparky says, at Nat Turner, just mad because they boiled his body after they hung him for his slave rebellion. So, there, yeah, the original Nat Turner. But at any rate, but that's cool. I appreciate Nat Turner watching. And if you can learn something, Nat Turner, fine. And if you don't, when hey, at any rate, where was I? Oh, for God's sake, you know what I forgot to do? I forgot to put that stupid thing across. Oh, and they asked me why I drink. Well, I don't actually drink. Okay, that was actually a book by the Grease Man, a comedian guy years ago, called They Ask Me Why I Drink. All right, don't forget, everybody, I'm just about out of here. PayPal, if you can make a contribution. Buymeacoffee.com is great. Don't forget, when you go to Buy Me a Coffee, you can do, buy Garland a coffee for $5, or how many coffees you want to buy at $5 each. And of course, you can now, just like Patreon or Buy Me a Coffee, you can say, I want to do this $5, $10, $15. You can say, I want to do this monthly and become a monthly. So that's a great option. Of course, my Cash App issue stuff is there. And last but not least, don't forget, go to rockfin.com/Garland Nixon. It costs nothing. Please become a member of my Rockfin channel. In case they throw me off of YouTube, you will immediately have a way to see all my stuff. It's free speech. They don't show advertisements. Rockfin's great. And last but not least, if you can afford it, please, $14.99 a month on Rockfin to become a subscriber to my channel. If you can afford that, I really appreciate it. And if you if you sign up for a year, they give you a couple free months. It comes to like $12.40 or something, whatever. If you can afford it, that's great. If not, hey, just join at no cost. All right. Thanks a lot, everybody. Don't forget to smash the like button, and don't forget to share this on all your social media platforms. Thanks a lot. Peace. I'm out.